And welcome and thank you everyone for attending this morning's webinar brought to you by the Chamber of Commerce of Kittitas County. This morning, again, this session is being recorded and the PowerPoint slide deck will be made available to download on the SharedWork website. It'll be found at esd.wa.gov/SharedWork/webinar. Today, we're going to be talking about the SharedWork program, as well as the labor market information, as it was formerly known as. Now it is known as the data from the Employment Security Department. We have Don Messick this morning that'll be speaking on the data for Kittitas County in Washington State. We will also have a open mic Q&A session after both the presentations have been completed. Do want to invite you to please feel free to type your questions into the chat box at any time. And then at the conclusion of both webinars, we will go ahead and take the questions at that time, first from the chat, and then we'll open it up to the attendees to ask their questions. So for right now, I'd like to introduce Katie from the Kittitas Chamber of Commerce, as she'd like to discuss with you the upcoming events with the Chamber of Commerce of Kittitas County.
Thank you, Stephen. I appreciate you guys being here today, and thank you, Don, for presenting on the labor market statewide and countywide. I really appreciate those reports. So I think it's going to be a great webinar, really valuable information. The last few months we've been doing, or half the year, we've been doing SharedWork webinars in partnership, and they've been really beneficial to our business community. And it's just been a great resource for us. And all of these recordings we do also keep on our website. We're really trying to build that portfolio of video resources. So you can definitely find those also on our website, kittitascountychamber.com. But coming up, we're kind of in an end of year transition period with the chamber. We are a staff of about 7 of us, and we're all kind of switching gears and getting ready for 2024. And with that comes some transitions and positions. So I now focus on membership outreach countywide from Snoqualmie Pass all the way to Vantage Bridge. We have another employee that's moving into more programs and events. And so we're kind of in this transition period at the chamber, which is really exciting for us. And we're looking forward to 2024 and having a year of purpose and intentionality and what that looks like with building those intimate relationships with these business owners in our county and supporting small business that way. So we're really excited. It's been a really busy year and end of year. So we're looking forward to the upcoming events and programs that we're doing. We have a really exciting opportunity right now to be one of 6 organizations in the state to host the National Civic Speed competition through the U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation. And so portal just opened on Monday for middle school students. And so we're excited to see our youth get really engaged in civics in our county, and it's also Central Washington wide. So if there's students that are in Grant County or Okanagan County or Chelan County, Yakima County, those students can all also join us here in Ellensburg for our civics bee. So really excited about that. That's new this year. And then just looking ahead for winter in Q1, we're going to be doing our annual awards gala, which is where we will announce our Chamber Business Award winners, as well as the State of Community Address, which is when we get the county and all the cities together and talk about projects and upcoming events happening in our county come 2024. So a lot going on. It's never ending, it feels like, but yeah, just excited for new events and new programs that we're bringing to the county and supporting local business. So yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate it and look forward to hearing the webinar today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Katie. Sounds like there's a lot going on at the Chamber of Commerce and surrounding counties. So it's wonderful that you get to support so many people here in the state of Washington, in your county, as well as the counties surrounding. So thank you so much for that wonderful update. So we'll just go right into our webinar today. First, we're going to be talking about the SharedWork program. And I want to thank you all for having me here today. My name is Stephen Brediger, Program Coordinator for the SharedWork program. And you may be asking, what is SharedWork? And how is it going to help your business? Well, SharedWork was enacted into law in 1983 establishing a voluntary short-time compensation business program. It was intended to be an excellent resource to help stabilize business operations during periods of lower economic activity. It allows employers to preserve their workforce by reducing employees' hours to help save on payroll and keep the business operating. Now, when your employees' usual hours are reduced with SharedWork, they are then paid a percentage of their unemployment insurance weekly benefit. Each week, the business can reduce employees' hours between 10% up to 50% of their usual hours worked. Now, the wonderful thing about this program is a vast majority of Washington business qualify for the program. However, they just don't know about it. So that's my job today, is to share with you about the Shared Work program. Now, Shared Work over the last 40 years has been proven to help employers stabilize their business, retain their skilled workforce, which allows your employees to continue serving customers and help your business avoid costly layoffs and eventually attract future talent. With the Shared Work program, we had a employer reach out to us named Anna Ramirez. Now, she realized she may not have enough work for everyone in the months ahead due to a business slowdown, and she realized she needs to reduce payroll costs by at least 20%, which would mean letting go of 2 or more employees. Now, these are employees over the years that she's invested in by training them, paying their benefits, and she values them as her employees, and she doesn't want to let them go. So Anna, she called the Shared Work program, checked her eligibility, just a few short moments. Then, once she found out that she was eligible to participate, and that as long as she had 2 permanent employees that'll qualify for a claim, she'd be approved. So she filled out the short 2-page application, as well as a list of all the employees that were actually going to be participating. She then went back to work, informed her employees that she signed up all eligible employees for the Shared Work program. She now has the flexibility to reduce her employees' hours as needed each week between 10 to 50% of a reduction as the needs of the business arise. She's avoided laying off any employees and is able to get the same cost savings by just reducing hours instead of laying off. So, what are the eligibility requirements? Well, they've been streamlined to make Shared Work even more accessible to almost all businesses in Washington State. So, for a business to qualify in Washington State, they just need to be a legally registered business with an active Employment and Security Department number. As I mentioned earlier, needs to have a minimum of 2 permanent employees who are not corporate officers that'll be affected by a reduction in hours. She'll then also need to provide, or your business or any business will need to provide the same benefits to employees in the same manner that you were providing them before you reduce their hours. Employer requirements are, again, they need to be permanent employees. Now they can be part-time, they can be full-time, they can even be salary employees. However, if it's going to be salary employees, you just need to convert them to a hourly rate of pay. So that way, if there's a reduction in hours, there's a reduction in pay. The employees also need to have a minimum of 680 hours during their base year to qualify for an unemployment claim. And the employees need to commit to being able and available for all hours scheduled by their employer. So it's not a lot of requirements to be able to have Shared Work and participate. So what are the top 5 reasons? Well, that people sign up for Shared Work? Well, loss of contracts or reduction in orders, maintain employee morale in response to an economic downturn, to reduce payroll costs, as well as reducing the cost of hiring and training new employees. Here's an example of what a business that is using SharedWork had to say about the program. And this is Jen Post from Prestige Escrow from Woodinville, Washington. SharedWork has given us a great amount of balance and flexibility to pivot and budget our expenses wisely. It's given the employees a sense of security, and they know that we're doing this, such as signing up for SharedWork, so that we don't have to make more drastic measures, laying people off. So there's a massive relief of anxiety in that sense as well. And we hear this all the time here in SharedWork. SharedWork has been a fantastic program, over, like I said, over the last 40 years here in Washington State. So how do you enroll? Well, it's very fast and very easy. Interested employers should first contact the SharedWork program by calling 800-752-2500 and select option 3. And they'll be able to check their business eligibility with a plan specialist. Once you're ready to apply, you'll then need to fill out the 2-page application, as well as assign an employer representative that'll act as a liaison between the staff at your business and the SharedWork staff. Your employees will also need to be listed, the ones that'll be participating as well. Now, once approved, the SharedWork plan will last for 1 year. Once approved, then, the employees will then enroll in the SharedWork program by completing an application for unemployment benefits. The employees will then, once their hours are reduced and continuously, they'll file their weekly claims. And when their hours are reduced, they'll receive a percentage of their unemployment benefits. One of the nice things about SharedWork is while you're on SharedWork, at no time do any of the employees on the SharedWork program have to look for work. So no work search requirement as a condition of eligibility. So that's wonderful. Then each week after your employees are paid, the employer representative will receive a payment report. It'll go over the previous week's claims. The employer representative will check it against the payroll records to check for accuracy. To find out more, again, please reach out to SharedWork staff at 800-752-2500. They are available between the hours of 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. Option 3, you'll be able to talk to someone about a new plan inquiry. If you would like to email for information, you can do so by emailing SharedWork SECT at esd.wa.gov. We look forward to hearing from you and hope to be of assistance. I now want to turn it over to Don Messick of the data group, which is formerly known as Labor Market Information, as Don will be giving you a data update as well as an economic update with the information he has today. So thank you, Don, for being here this morning, and we look forward to hearing all the great information you have for us.
Thank you, Stephen. I learned a bit about SharedWork. I've been with the agency quite a while. I learned some more. Also, Katie, about the chamber. So I got more slides than I should have probably, so I'll try to go through them pretty rapidly. I serve 7 counties here in Central Washington, and our labor market information branch is now called Data Architecture Transformation Analytics. It's just an acronym for data. We're kind of the economic intelligence agency for employment security. We're funded heavily by the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And we, among other things, we calculate employment figures, unemployment rates, and do a lot of economic analysis, wage surveys, occupational projections, and so on. So our clients are WorkSource offices, North and South Central workforce development centers, EDCs, job corps centers, chambers, ports, public, private sector schools, universities, Rotary, Kiwanis clubs, elected officials, media, banks, credit unions, and so on. Everybody takes that information, uses it as they see fit. The 7 counties I serve are Adams, Chelan, Douglas, Grant, Kittitas, Okanagan, and Yakima counties. Incidentally, this morning at 10 a.m., Washington just released our monthly employment report for October. It was released at 10 a.m. today, and next Tuesday on the 21st, we release county level employment figures, unemployment rates. Next slide, please, Steve. This is the area I serve, highlighted in yellow. And next slide, please. Today's presentation will basically focus on our 3 main data sets that we use. The first is what we call quarterly census employment and wage. And these are employment and wage figures obtained every quarter when employers file their tax reports. We have a section in our branch in the data division called QCW, and their job is to purify these data, basically. Right now, the most current data we have, which basically gives us employment and wage figures, also the number of firms. We just obtained 22 data, revised 22 figures in September of this year. So it's a very good data. It's very slow, however. It takes us usually 6 to 9 months to get this, but it's excellent for time series analysis. So the first part will be, we'll stress quarterly census employment and wage data to look at more long-term trends in the county's economy. Second part here is current employment statistics data. And these are basically the information, the estimates from which we get the monthly jobs report. In fact, just today I mentioned that we released October data. The information that we'll be presenting for the county is still only current as of September, but that's another major Bureau of Labor Statistics program called CES. The key point to remember on the current employment statistics data are that they're based on place of work, where the jobs are. And so here we're looking at jobs in Kittitas County, regardless where the people come from to hold those jobs. We're looking at place of work employment. The third major employment grouping we'll look at today, or the economic data, will be civilian labor force data. Civilian labor force data are estimates based on place of residence, where people live. And so here we're looking at residents in Kittitas County. So the key difference between current employment statistics and local area unemployment statistics are current employment statistics, we're counting jobs by place of work. Local area unemployment statistics, from which we derive the unemployment rate, are based on place of residence. And finally, I'll wrap it up with a couple slides on labor market information. We have a lot of data on our home page called our LMI page, and I'll show you a couple of the key hyperlinks to get to that data and point of contact information. Next slide, please. When we look at our quarterly census employment wage data, one of the key things to remember, kind of the short stories highlighted in red. This is called North American Industry Classification System. It's just a way of classifying employers into their job categories. Specifically, there are 19 private sector and 3 government sectors by NAICS codes. And so what do I mean? Well, basically, we're taking all, if we look at the first item on this chart, NAICS 11 is agriculture. So these are primarily growers. We have some also forestry and fishing. That's not quite as large here in Kittitas County. We're looking at agricultural employers, primarily growers. Here in Kittitas County, it's heavily Timothy hay, but we do have some vineyards and deciduous tree fruits. We have a lot of different employment and wage data we get, everything from manufacturing, wholesale trade, retail trade, down through health services, accommodation, food services, and of course the three government sectors: federal, state, and local. Next slide, please. Now, if we look at all these different categories, and by the way, one of the methods to my madness is often highlighted in text boxes or in the headings. If we do a 10-year analysis of Kittitas County in terms of jobs, we see that in the last 10 years, from 2012 to 2022, total covered employment rose by 17.3% in Kittitas County. That's an annualized rate of 1.6%, a little bit slower than the 20.7% rise in the number of jobs in Washington. It had an annualized rate of 1.9%. We went from basically 13,594 jobs in 2012, up through 15,943 in 2022. Next slide, please. Here, if we take all these 22 categories of employers in the private sector and the government sector, we have 22 groups. I sorted them by number of jobs, and that's here. The highlights in green indicate the employment sectors or industries, if you will, that added the most jobs in Kittitas County in the last 10 years, and those in the light red below that lost the most jobs. And the takeaway is that there were 4 industries: construction, local government, retail trade, health services, that accounted for over 3/4, over 3/4 of all the 2,349 jobs added in the county in the last 10 years. Next slide, please. This is the same data. Here I just pulled out the 8 major sectors, and I wanted to see, specify how many jobs did these sectors add to the job market or lose. And I think the thing that stood out is that construction obviously was the industry which added the most jobs in the county in the last 10-year period of the 22 major NAICS sectors or NAICS categories. The next slide, please. Here we look at, in absolute terms, Kittitas County construction sector. It gained 861 jobs. That's a large 156.8% upturn in the last 10 years for an annualized growth rate of 9.9%. Next slide, please. But here, if we look at relative terms, I think it tells even a more important story. In relative terms, construction job growth was dynamic from 2012 to 2022. And if you look at the 2012 data, you'll see that construction accounted for 4% of all jobs, all covered employment countywide in 2012. 10 years later, in 2022, construction accounted for 8.8% of all jobs in the county. And this indicates that the local construction sector was relatively more important in the local labor market in 2022 than it was in 2012. Next slide, please. In absolute terms, local government was another sector that added the second greatest number of jobs in the county in the last 10 years, gained 367 more jobs. It went from 2,136 to 2,503 jobs. That's a 17.2% growth rate over 10 years, or an annualized upturn of 1.6%. And if we go to the next slide, please. But in relative terms, local government job growth was actually relatively stable over the past 10 years. It accounted for 15.7% of all covered jobs countywide in 2012 and in 2022. And by the way, local government includes local public schools. It also includes local health services employment, such as Kittitas Valley Hospital and Clinic and so on. As well as, police, fire, libraries, roads crews, and so on. The next slide. By the way, thank you, Stephen. I appreciate that. On a dollar basis, here, if we just look at payrolls in the county, we see that I ranked here all the 22 NAICS sectors in terms of payroll growth to see which sectors grew the most, which pumped the most money into the local economy, and which were growing on an absolute term the most. And on a dollar basis, construction, what we call NAICS 23, payroll jumped by $76.1 million. That's a 340.6% increase during the past 10 years, more than any other local industry. And you'll see it's highlighted in the yellow row here. So basically, again, you'll see the construction, local government, state government, accommodation, food services. By the way, accommodation, food services is primarily hotels, eating and drinking places. The big takeaway is construction industry grew by, on a dollar basis, more than any other industry in the county in the past 10 years. The next slide, please. On a percentage basis, however, there's a smaller sector called real estate and rentals. And this payroll skyrocketed from $3.2 million countywide to $15.6 million from 2012 through 2022. That's a 390.9% increase, faster on a percentage basis than any other local industry. And what does that mean? The real estate rental leasing sector comprises establishments primarily engaged in selling, renting, leasing, or allowing the use of tangible or intangible assets. And that means it's a diverse array of businesses, such as real estate agents and brokers, property management, real estate appraisers, automotive and equipment rentals, self-storage unit rentals, trailer rentals. And it's no surprise, really, with many people moving into Kittitas County, it's not surprising that we observe this 390.9% surge in real estate and rentals payroll from 2012 to 2022. And by the way, that equates to an astounding 17.2% annualized payroll wage growth during the last 10 years. Construction, of course, is right behind. It's pretty rapid, but on a percentage basis, real estate and rentals, largely population driven, payrolls jumped dramatically. Next slide, please. Here we just is a pie chart looking at kind of the bottom line is out of those 22 industries, which industries provide the most jobs? I'm sorry, could you go back one slide, please? Even the employment. We had nearly 16,000 jobs in the county in 2022, and approximately 62.7% of all local covered jobs in the county were in 5 sectors: local government, accommodation and food services, retail, state government, and construction. It's not a very diverse economy. It indicates that nearly 2/3 of all jobs were in these 5 sectors. But it's also interesting to note in Kittitas County, the relatively high percentage. You see that 15.1% of all jobs countywide were in accommodation and food services. Think hotels, eating and drinking places. 15.1% Kittitas County in accommodation, food services. Statewide, it's 7.8%. So it indicates the importance of that industry in the local economy. The next slide is the same information. If I get that next slide up, please, Stephen. Covered wages, nearly 800 million in total payroll. Again, approximately 64.1%, nearly 2/3 of all wages earned were in 5 industries: local government, state government, construction, accommodation, food services, and retail trade. Again, it's interesting to note the relatively high percentage of covered wages, 8.3% in accommodation food services in Kittitas County. Statewide, 2.9%. So, and the next slide kind of sums up these two pie charts. If I could get that next slide up there. Basically, what was the payroll in Kittitas County in 2012? 799.7 million, an average annual employment of nearly 16,000 jobs. The average annual wage, 50,162. That was 60.5% of Washington's annual wage last year of 82,000. The reason for the disparity is primarily that Washington state's payroll is heavily dominated in King and Snohomish counties by two industries, software publishing and aircraft manufacturing. So this 60.5% figure is very similar to other counties in central Washington and actually many counties statewide. It's primarily because of the huge payrolls in software and aircraft manufacturing, especially in King and Snohomish counties. Also, a little breakout here in local government, accommodation food services, retail, state government. These are the industries that provide the most jobs. And the third column to the right is looking at the wages provided by those industries. So primarily we're comparing the percent of jobs versus the percent of wages by these five major industries. The next slide. Summary. There's a lot of stuff here, and I probably would take a little too long to read all of it. I'm already talking too much, but I think maybe the last three bullets are especially interesting. Construction, local government, retail, health services, private health services accounted for over 3/4 of the jobs added countywide. Of the 2,356 jobs added in the last 10 years. The fourth bullet is that from 2012 to 2022, the local construction sector ranked first in all 22 NAICS sectors in Kittitas County in job growth, up 863 jobs and 157.2%, and in total payroll growth, up 76.2 million, 340.9% increase. The final bullet, fifth bullet, is on a percentage basis. Real estate and rentals payroll ranked first, soaring from 3.2 million to 15.6 million from 2012 through 2022, up 390.9%. Well, that kind of gives you an overview of the QCW trends. If I get the next slide. Now we're going to go into the non-farm market. Here we just get estimates that are more current. Much of the information goes up through September. And again, as I mentioned, on 21 November, we'll be releasing October data. But the first, kind of in a nutshell, if you look at this graph, you see that the burnt orange bars depict growth or loss rates in Kittitas County's non-farm market, how many jobs were added or lost on an annual average basis. And the navy blue color indicate job growth or loss rates on an annual average basis in the state. A quick takeaway here is that really the non-farm market in Kittitas County plummeted in 2020. That was the year COVID hit us, the COVID pandemic. We lost 9.3% of our jobs. It also ebbed a bit in 2021, down 1%, before rebounding in 2022, a strong rebound in 2022. So that's kind of a quick overview of how the county has compared with the state in terms of non-farm growth or loss rates all the way back to 2010. The next slide, please, Steve. This slide basically in 2020, and these are COVID-19 related non-farm losses. We can see that in 2020, the COVID-19 related non-farm losses were more traumatic to the local economy. We lost 9.3% of our jobs here, than to Washington's economy, which lost 5.3% of total employment. The next slide, please. And here I've taken, I'm sorry, but let's go a little bit fast forward. This last year, in 2022, Kittitas County's non-farm market grew robustly, up 6.7%, and it surpassed Washington's 4.7% growth pace. That's a total job gain countywide of 1,060 jobs, and this table also gives the summary of the major industries in the county and how they fared. But if I could go to the next slide, please. This sums up basically of the 1,060 non-farm jobs added countywide last year, 61.3% were in these industries: state and local government, education, leisure and hospitality, think hotels, restaurants, amusement and recreation, fitness centers, and so on, or construction. So even though state and local government was hit very hard, it did rebound last year. Leisure and hospitality rebounded, construction rebounded. But, and this is kind of a big exception, if I get the next slide. A key thing to note that differentiates Kittitas County from the state, that even though we had robust job growth in 2022, total non-farm employment was still minus 4.2% and 740 jobs shy of the pre-pandemic era average of 17,570 jobs. So what am I saying? That we're still not back to where we were pre-COVID. And that's different than the state. The state has regained all jobs. 4 sectors had still not recovered, and shown in this table. 4 sectors had still not recovered to the pre-pandemic era of 2019. Wholesale trade was down 60 jobs, and wholesale trade here in Kittitas County heavily dominated by the wholesale trade of agricultural produce, especially Timothy hay. Education and health services. Here we're looking at private education. It's not such a large player, but we're looking at health services, private health services, down 100 jobs. Leisure and hospitality down 240. State and local government down over 1,000, 1,130. And if I may get the next slide, Stephen. Here's the same information, pulled out the major 8 industries in Kittitas County. We can see that countywide, state and local government education lost more jobs than any other sector since the pre-COVID era, 2019. Again, 4 sectors had not fully recovered to the pre-pandemic era of 2019, but of these 4 industries, state and local government education was down 1,130 jobs, still substantially below the pre-COVID level. Now, this is a broad category which includes not only covered jobs like teachers, professors, administrators, full-time staff, but also non-covered jobs such as non-covered corporate officers, students working as interns, teaching assistants at school or college bookstores, in gymnasiums, cafeterias. So I think what is the takeaway? It's the state and local government is still not back to where it was pre-COVID. And if I have the next slide, please, Stephen. I went back and pulled for this next slide, if I get one more, the state and local government still tallied roughly 20% fewer jobs in the first 9 months of 2023 versus in 2019, the pre-COVID era, but loss rates have recently decelerated. Now here I looked at January, the number of jobs we had in state and local government. Now these are public education, so we're including jobs at CWU, Kittitas School District, Ellensburg School District, Clay Elum School District. It is obvious, I think, that CWU is a big player in this, but this is a combined state and local government ed. And you notice that back in January of this year, we were 1,240 jobs below January of 2019, a 22.8% decline. Is somewhat improved. The loss rates have decelerated. By this September, we had 4,590 jobs. There were 3,970 jobs across Kittitas County in this sector in September 19. That's a 620 job, minus 13.5% downturn. So in ballpark figures, we're still down around 20%. The encouraging news is that growth rates are declining. I should add, and I normally cannot disclose any particular school district or university, but in this case, because I've read this in the CW Observer, I can, in other words, an overt source, what I can say is that many state universities, the employment is not up to where it was pre-COVID. And I think that's, again, we're not looking at just CW, looking at WSU, UW, EWU, and so on. But rather than get into all the details, I think the takeaway is simply when you look at the data, we can see that state and local government still is not back to where it was. Employment's not back to where it was in the pre-COVID era. The next slide, please. Now here, I'm looking not so much going back to pre-COVID. I'm just looking at this year versus last year. And here we again look to our Bureau of Labor Statistics provided information and current employment statistics. Estimates show that non-farm employment in Kittitas County has actually contracted year over year from July through September of this year. So we see the growth trends. And of course, the burnt orange bars look at Kittitas County growth trends this September versus last September, going back the last 12 months. And year over year, it's pretty clear that non-farm employment in Kittitas County, it had expanded for 27 months, right up through June of 2023, before contracting in the past 3 months. So that is a concerning trend and one that we'll be watching in months ahead. The next slide, please. And here we're looking at preliminary estimates just for September. We have a job loss rate of 0.9%. So the current status in terms of this September versus last in the local job market is not really good. We're down 160 jobs. And that's a loss rate of minus 0.9%. Not a precipitous decline, but many industries are, I think we're starting to feel the pinch here and not quite up to where it was last year. The next slide, please. And I went and looked at 3 industries in the next few slides. Construction employment was on a growth streak for 35 consecutive months before contracting or stagnating in the last 4 months. So construction's still doing okay, but compared to last year, it is slowing a bit. And I think that heading maybe sums it up. You know, we were on a boom period here for 35 months. I think it's pretty obvious that rising interest rates are playing a factor here. And we can let the data speak for themselves. One thing that our CES estimates show is that the last 4 months, compared to the 4 months last year, construction growth is slowing. The next slide. And here we're looking at private ed. This is a kind of the flip side of the coin. Private education allowed parochial schools and so on. It's not such a large player here in Kittitas County, but private health services, ambulatory care, nursing, assisted living care, social services. The health services industry has advanced for 21 consecutive months. And here we're looking at private education going up 21 months. Statewide, this industry's been expanding for 30 months. So that's a growth area here in Kittitas County. And the next slide, if you will. Leisure and hospitality, however, started to hit a wall. Basically, our estimates indicate that year over year, employment in Kittitas County's leisure and hospitality industry has either stagnated or decreased from May through September. That's what our estimates are showing. So it looks like things are slowing a bit for leisure and hospitality. Again, hotels, eating and drinking places, and also these everything from movie theaters to um, the fitness centers and so on. But in aggregate, I think a lot of this is really the food services and hotels. It is basically slowing a bit compared to corresponding months last year, at least going back to May through September of this year. And the next slide, this sums it up. And again, I don't want to go through some, obviously talking too much, but I'd like to highlight the second, third, and fourth bullets here. Despite the job growth in the county in the last 10 years, total non-farm employment was 4.2%, 740 jobs shy of the pre-pandemic average of 17,570 jobs in 2019. The belt tightening in state and local government education caused much of this downturn. We're looking at roughly 20% fewer jobs in the first 9 months of this year versus the first 9 months of 2019. And the fifth and final bullet, local non-farm employment in Kittitas County has contracted year over year from July through September of this year. And the next slide, please. Here, looking at unemployment and civilian labor force data. And I think that the big thing is that if you look at the employment, you see that last year unemployment rate was pretty low, 5.9%. Was still not back to the historic low we had in 2017, but it was, moving in the right direction, definitely compared to 2020. And the next slide, please, Stephen. Year over year unemployment rates, we're hitting, this is kind of the good news of the local economic indicators. Our unemployment rate is low. That 3.9% reading this September is definitely lower than the 5.1% reading September of last year, and that our rates year over year have decreased in each of the past 6 months. So that's the good side of the local labor force data. The next slide, please. However, there are some concerning trends, and often in data they don't always point in the same direction. But I think what this shows us, if we look at civilian labor force, and here we're not looking at pre-COVID, we're just looking at September of this year versus September of last year, August of this year versus August of last year. What it shows is that our civilian labor force was up a tick this September versus last, but it did decline in July and August. And I can give you some more specifics in the next slide, if you would, Stephen. This slide basically shows that between the Septembers of this year and last, the labor force did edge upward by 1%, but the number of unemployed plunged by 21.6%. That's good news. We had 243 fewer residents out of work. The unemployment rate fell year over year between the Septembers of 2022 and 2023, down from 5.1 to 3.9%. Next slide, please. Now, it so often seems we go from bad news to good news to bad news, and this is one of the things that does concern me. However, for the last 12 months, fewer residents have been in the local labor force than in the pre-COVID era. I've got a phone ring and I'm not going to answer that. For the past 12 months, fewer residents have been in the local labor force than in the pre-COVID era. Again, the pre-COVID era here is defined as October 2018 through September 2019. We can see that when we look at how are we doing now, is the labor force larger now than it was, or is it smaller? It's not. That's not so encouraging news. However, there were 1,166 fewer residents, minus 4.9%, in Kittitas County's labor force this September than in the pre-pandemic month of September 19. And what does concern me is a shrinking labor force is seldom good economic news. Now, some of this, I think, is just baby boomers left the labor force. um, during the pandemic, and many are not coming back. Other things we have, and of course, I don't single out any particular employer, but the Central Washington University is a huge employer here. And with lower students, working in jobs, I think it's likely this is probably a factor in this weak labor force we see right now in Kittitas County. And the next slide, please. Sum it up. Um, Here, I'd like to just go with the first bullet. Kittitas County's unemployment rate in 5.9% in 2022 was 0.7 of a point lower than 2021. The historic low was 5.2% in 2017. The second bullet, that year over year, monthly rates have decreased in each of the past 6 months. So we're kind of getting this mixed bag with, if you just looked at the unemployment rate, you would be very encouraged by what you saw. And I think that is a good sign. However, the last bullet, I think, sums up my concern with Kittitas County labor force. And the Kittitas County CLF stands for Civilian Labor Force contracted from October 2022 through September 23, below these pre-COVID months of October 2018 through September 2019. And most economists, I think, would agree that a shrinking labor force is seldom good economic news. The next slide, please. I've talked again too long, but I wanted to refer people to our homepage. This is the main hyperlink to our homepage. And it's this. If you click on this esd.wa.gov labor market info, it takes you to the data architectures, takes you to our data branch website. That's it in a nutshell. It's probably the one key thing I can leave you with. If you click on this and you scroll down on that page, you will arrive at a labor market information section that also has a map of Washington's 39 counties. If you click on Kittitas County, you get this screen. And you can see there's a lot of information here, labor market information, focused on the Kittitas County economy. And that's probably one of the best pieces of information I can give is, where do you find the data? It's found here on our homepage. And the next slide, please. Now, this one is one of the screens, one of the pieces of information most clients find very useful. There's another section called frequently used links, which is on our main website. If you click on a section called Learn About an Occupation, you will see that the information shown in this slide. It provides projections by workforce development area, reference occupations projected to be in demand, not in demand, or balanced. And it's also called the occupations in demand list, but the occupations in demand projections for the South Central Workforce Development Area are really prepared for Kittitas, Klickitat, Skamania, and Yakima counties combined. So the good news, bad news is that we cannot find projections unique to Kittitas County, but we can provide projections for this workforce development area, the 4-county area. And I think the final wrap-up point I'd like to make on this demand decline list is that the Data Division of Employment Security, who are part of our staff, we have about 50 staff members working in our branch or on our division. Our data section prepares this occupations in demand list. But workforce development areas, workforce development councils, the South Central Workforce Office in Yakima modifies or owns this list. So our folks develop it. The projections are, I think, excellent. The methodology is astounding. It's not infallible. And when we find certain occupations that don't pass the common sense test, the workforce development councils have the authority to change it. Now, Amy Martinez is the chief of that branch in Yakima. And I'd like to wrap it up. The final slide is point of contact. And also, again, I've got our website on there, my email. I might add, I do monthly reports for the Wenatchee MSA Chelan Douglas counties for Yakima, and roughly every 2 or 3 months I do reports for Grant, Kittitas, Okanagan, and Adams, and I blast this information out via email distribution lists. If any of this information would be useful to any of you for any purpose, it's free. Please send me an email and I'll add you to my list. That concludes my briefing, and pending any questions, I hope that was useful.
Thank you so much, Don. Really do appreciate sharing that information with us today about the Data Architecture Transformation Analytics Division of the Employment Security Department.
Thank you, and Cheryl for asking me. I do appreciate it, Stephen, for all your assistance.
Absolutely. And with that, we're out of time for the day. I do want to again thank the Kittitas Chamber of Commerce for inviting us here today with Katie Estes from the Chamber of Commerce of Kittitas County, again, for having us join today. We will actually be wrapping up our webinar series for SharedWork. It'll be SharedWork and our Friends at Labor Market info or data unit, Tuesday, November 28th, 11:50 to 1 p.m. So please feel free to register. Again, today's webinar has been recorded. It will be made available online at esd.wa.gov/sharedwork/webinar. And again, I want to thank you. Katie, do you have any closing comments for today?
No, just thank you, Don, for that great overview of the labor market information. It's really, really neat to learn about just the growth in the last 10 years and what it looks like for today in Kittitas County. I mean, there was some things that you were saying that I didn't realize. So I think all those who do get your reports are very thankful for all that data that we can use for
You're most
our
welcome,
businesses
Katie.
here.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, with that, again, Katie, I want to thank you and the Kittitas Chamber of Commerce for having SharedWork and the data unit of Employment Security Department, formerly known as Labor Market Info, today for today's webinar. We look forward to seeing everyone next time, again, Tuesday, November 28th from 11:50 a.m. to 1 p.m. Look forward to seeing you then. Hope everyone has a wonderful day. Take care.
Thank you, Stephen.